When you look at the Bible, you got to do your history. When you're going to believe in something, you better be an expert on it because faith is not always going to work. You better know the history on that. You better know all of this. See, the Christianity evolves from Catholicism. Where does Catholicism come from? Rome. It was created in Rome. It was not created in Israel. It did not come from Jesus. It did not come from the apostles, the 12 apostles. No, the Catholic Church began in Rome, Italy. Yeah, they destroyed the organization that Jesus created. They tortured until death all the apostles. Whenever they would kill an apostle in a vicious way, and if the apostles replaced that person, the Catholics would find them and torture them until there were no more apostles and that the organization that Jesus created was too scared to even exist. So it ended. And then the Catholic Church began calling itself the Holy Church of God. This is a fact. So now the Catholic Church gets all these scrolls that they can find in Israel, and they assemble these scrolls into what is today called the Bible. And the Catholic Bible has a few more books, and other churches call it the Apocrypha. A Catholic Bible has a few more books in it, and the Bible is just consisted of scrolls from different teachers, different prophets, different religious leaders, um, some political leaders that were spiritual. But all these scrolls were just the writings of of different men. And these scrolls were never supposed to be combined into one book. Never. So what the Bible is like car parts from Volkswagen, car parts from Chevrolet, car parts from Nissan, car parts from Toyota and Volvo and Renault and Peugeot and Audi, Trabant from East Germany, former East Germany. It's getting car parts from all those different car companies and trying to make a car out of it. Does it work? It may start, but it will not go. It's always it's not going to work. I mean, altogether, it's not going to go anywhere because every car company from different countries they use their own system, yeah, their own mechanics, their own. I mean, I don't mean the guys who fix cars, but I mean, the what makes the car run. Every car company has a different way of doing it. And that means all the car parts are going to be different. You can try to force them together, but it's not going to work properly and it's not going to go. That is the Bible. That's why the Bible contradicts itself all over the place. One example, in the book of Revelations, which is the last book in the Bible, it says a statement something like, whoever adds or takes away from this book is not of God. So that means they define this verse to talk about the Bible. But there was no Bible. When that was written, when the book of Revelations was written by John, there was no Bible. John was not talking about the Bible because it didn't exist. He was talking about his writings. But the Catholic Church took that out so that it made it sound like John was talking about the whole Bible. How could he have? It didn't even exist yet. And there's a verse in Deuteronomy, which is the fourth book of the Old Testament. There's a verse in there that says the same thing. Whoever takes away or adds to this is not of God. And this writing is evil. That's what it basically says. So if that's true, then everything after Deuteronomy is not from God. So the Bible should only have the first four books, if that's true. Do you see what I mean? It contradicts Revelations. You see? If what it says in Deuteronomy is true, then Revelations should not even be in the Bible. The New Testament shouldn't even be in the Bible. Anything after Deuteronomy should not be in the Bible. Because it's evil, according to that verse. So the Deuteronomy verse, what that's talking about is the first 5 books of the Bible. This is called the Law of Moses. And this is the foundation of the Jewish belief system. Yeah, this is called, I think it's called the Torah. I think that's what they call it, the Torah. It's the first 5 books. And then there's other writings too, the Talmud and other things. But this what Deuteronomy is talking about is something different. It's not talking about the Bible because there was no Bible at that time. It didn't exist. You see, that's a contradiction there. At the at the end of the Bible and the beginning of the Bible have the same verse, and that verse says, "Anything after this is not of God." Do you see? That's a lot of ministers don't understand that. I got in a big fight one time with a Baptist minister about these verses. He couldn't answer it. And I waited. He said he was going to talk to his supervising minister to get the answer, and he never did get back to me. And that was in 1991. And how many years now is that? It's 25 years later, and I'm still waiting for an answer from this guy. And I know the answer. I just wanted to hear what he wanted to say, and he really got mad at me because I asked him a question he could not answer. I wasn't trying to beat him up in a debate. No. I wanted to know what he thought, and he could not answer. He simply could not answer my question. So this is an example of that shows you the Bible was never meant to exist, which means Christianity was never meant to exist either. It is a man made religion created by the Catholic Church after they destroyed the organization that was created by Jesus Christ himself. This is fact. Yeah, this is fact. And to really, really get technical, the Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, and also Isaiah and Ezekiel, they talk about the Messiah as a political leader. Not only a spiritual leader, but a political leader. And Jesus was not political. So the Catholics, they are the ones who manipulated these writings to say that Jesus was the Messiah. Really, he wasn't. See, you got to do your research. If you're going to have an opinion on something, you have to do your research. This is healthy communication. When you do your research and then develop your opinion, that is healthy communication. Back in the late 1800s, when we were placed on reservations, they were prison camps in the beginning. And this is a situation where we couldn't leave, we were not allowed to hunt. Our knives and guns were taken from us, and we were only allowed to eat whatever the American government gave to us, which was really no good food. The quality of the food was okay when it left places like Chicago and stuff like that, but once it got to some of these train stations between there and the reservation, a lot of these handlers would sell it, and then they would buy old food and put that in there instead, and these middlemen would make a lot of money. Yeah. So what we got on the reservation was bullshit food. Yeah, it was really no good. And we ended up getting all kinds of diseases like heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. And then at the same time, our language and ceremonies were declared illegal by the United States. So we were hit physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Soon after that, our minds became weak. And these, as I said earlier, these are the 4 parts of the self. So with the 4 parts of the self being sick, we lost our connection to our sacred center. So we started to focus on communicating away from that. And then the priests came from the various churches, and they learned our ways and said that since our ways conflict with the Bible, that our ways are evil, that they come from Satan. They come from the devil. So in our weakened states, we slowly began to accept that. Now, another thing is that there were some Lakota people that didn't want to accept that. They wanted to hang on to the traditional Lakota Star Knowledge ways. And if they revolted, they were sent to a mental hospital in Canton, South Dakota, which was set up for all reluctant Indians in America that did not want to become Christianized. They were sent there. And these church priests also committed the medicine men, medicine women, holy men, holy women. They committed all of them to these mental asylums too. This way, the people would not go to them for help, that they would come to the churches. They wanted the Indian people to only go to the priests and not their traditional healers. So they sent the healers to this mental asylum to die. And if you are radical, you were sent there to die too. Yeah. So while this is happening, the priests are saying to the Indian people, if you believe our way, we will help your children. And so, there was a very, very dire straits time. And so a lot of Indians became Christians because of that. Like I said, we were weak-minded too at that point. And those who stuck it out, there were people who refused to accept Christianity, but they went to church anyway. What they were doing was they were putting up a candy store front. On the outside, they were acting like good little Christian Indians, but on the inside, they weren't. They were Star Knowledge people. Yeah? They did this because they didn't want to get sent to that mental asylum to die. That's sad, isn't it? But that's part of what happened back then. And it's because of these people who maintained this knowledge in secret. Thanks to them, they passed it down, to certain people like me, and we still have this knowledge. And I have this show, and I'm sharing it with you. Because this regards the sacred center. And we all have that. Yeah, this is not a Lakota thing. This is a Ikje Oyate thing. Ikje Oyate means human being. When you live this way, as I said in the beginning, you communicate as a human, not as a Lakota, not as a German, or a Japanese, or an African. You communicate as a human. Yeah? That's really important to know. So, that's how it was back then. Yeah? Now remember I said that the priest said to the Indians, we will help your children. So, they took the children away from the parents, sent them to boarding school hundreds of miles away, where these children were tortured to speak only English and learn the civilized Christian way. If they spoke about home, they were tortured. These schools didn't do background checks in those days. Yeah, the pay was really low, so they got really no good teachers in these schools. A lot of these teachers were sadistic. They got sexual pleasure from torturing people. And here, this is like summer holiday camp for them. And the same thing for perverts. A lot of perverts now have their pick of the litter. And they could get away with it. That's what happened. A lot of these children were murdered. They were killed. They were raped. They were molested. And there's a lot of unmarked graves near these schools. Not all of these children are accounted for. So, those who made it through, what they learned was whatever they saw. Because a lot of these children never went back home. They were told by the priests that their families had died and that there was nobody there. And that broke their hearts. This is why some of these children, they were so sad they couldn't eat. And they ended up starving themselves to death. And those who made it through, like I said, they didn't really survive because they were not able to process all these emotional traumas that they experienced. They didn't know how, because the only adults that were around them were these unhealthy, abusive people, teachers, dorm matrons, cooks, janitors, priests. They were all unhealthy to them. That's all they knew. They learned how to become victims, and they learned how to become abusers to those who they considered weaker than themselves. So they didn't really survive. A lot of these children that made it through these schools, they had a lot of traumas that they didn't know how to deal with because all they saw was abuse. That's what they learned. There was no adult healthy role models to emulate. And remember I said these children were told that their families were all dead. So they didn't go back during summer holiday. They just stayed at these schools and worked. So when they left these schools, they tried to live in mainstream America. Nobody accepted them. They would say, you're a heathen. You're a dirty Indian. So they couldn't even get jobs off the reservation. And when they went back to the reservation, to their people, they ran into more problems. Many, many times they were not even accepted by their own people because their own people were saying, you're too white. You act like a white man. So they're caught in between. So a lot of them turned to alcohol to try to hide all of it, to try to forget everything. They turned to alcohol and then later drugs. There were some who tried to make it. They married each other because they knew each other went through the same thing. And they didn't want their children to go through what they went through. So they didn't teach them the language. They didn't teach them the culture. Those children, the children of these first generation boarding school people, those children are today's elders. When they were born, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn Lakota Star knowledge. They never got the opportunity to. When you look at an old person on the reservation today, they're not the connection to the ancient past. No, they were born in a Christian background at a time when the reservations were strongly Christian. So this is what happened. That's a native experience that a lot of people don't realize. This is what happened all over America and Canada too. So the next generation, they are sent to boarding school too. No choice. It's a little bit better, but they're still abused. They're still getting treated really no good. And so they grow up, have children, and they don't teach their children anything. What can they teach them? They don't know anything concerning their own language. This is why today most people cannot speak their own language, and what little cultural information they know is Christianized, meaning it's dualistic, and it's not the original ancient form. Okay, so the first generation of Indian kids that were sent to boarding school, since all around them were unhealthy adults who did nothing but abuse them, they didn't receive healthy parenting. They missed things that they should have learned about life. So they're lacking emotional development. So when they grow up, and those who make it through these boarding schools and then they have children, those children are also lacking that emotional support, that emotional development, because the parents don't know how to do it. Yeah, all they knew and all they learned was abuse. All they experienced in these schools was abuse. So they have a hard time trying to be a healthy parent. So they do the best that they can. But the children still are not receiving the proper emotional development, the experiences that healthy children should receive from healthy parents. They're still missing that. And so when that second generation grows up, they know even less concerning healthy parenting. And so their children receive even less. And every time this happens, the next generation becomes more dualistic than the previous one. So let me try to say that again. The first generation boarding school kids, they didn't receive proper parenting skills. So when they have children, their children are not receiving healthy training that they should be receiving. They're receiving even less than their parents. Now that second generation, when they grow up, see, they know even less. So when they have children, those children are receiving even less, and it gets worse with each generation, which also means that the less healthy emotional development they receive, the more dualistic they become. So with each generation is more becoming emotionally underdeveloped, they're also becoming more dualistic. So today, it's a huge mess on the reservation. We're incredibly, as a whole, we're incredibly underdeveloped emotionally, and we are incredibly dualistic. We're quick to attack each other. We're quick to pull each other down. We're just like the rest of the civilized, dualistic world. Notice I didn't say white man, because this is all over the world. It's not just among white countries. It's all over the world. Wherever there is a dualistic ideology, where one gender is considered less than and property of the other gender, you're going to have incredibly underdeveloped emotional people, which equals incredibly dualistic people. And that is unhealthy. So that started by the time of the late 1800s on the reservation.